Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how did ancient armies store their money. But before we get to that, did you know that you can now support the Ancient Warfare podcast on Patreon? Become a Legionarius, an Optio, or a Centurion at those different levels of patron and receive special access to the broadcast or even a copy of the magazine. By supporting us, you'll enable us to talk more about ancient warfare, which is something we all want. Please click the link below or search for the Ancient Warfare podcast on patreon.com. I'm Murray Dahm. I'm the assistant editor of Ancient Warfare magazine, and with me is Jasper, the editor. And as I said before, we're going to be talking today about how did ancient armies store their money.
Speaking of money, oh wait, no, we just did that. Haha, sorry. That was terrible. I don't know if we know how they stored their money. Clearly, they had to bring it along, and I decided I'd look at how they pay their soldiers, because that's what it's all about. That's why you have all the money. And it looks to me that the problem is that you have to bring all these coins. And that is, of course, that's big and heavy and a risk because it might be stolen. So what they do, it seems, is that they try to find ways around paying it or having it. That's not to say that they screwed their soldiers out of their money, although that certainly happens. But they find other ways to limit the number of times they have to pay, for instance, so that they might pay a lump sum at the beginning of a campaign and then just give the soldiers money to pay for their food while they're on campaign, and then promise them an amount of money at the end. Or they might say, we'll only pay for your daily stipend, again, for food and clothing and whatever necessities you might need on the campaign. And at the end, we're counting on capturing so much booty or getting money out of the defeated party that we can pay you all. Or like in the Roman army, they pay only a couple times a year, so that you don't actually have to bring large amounts of small coins that you have to pay every week, every month, but you only have to pay in every quarter, so you can bring more valuable coins, which take up less space and make the movement and transport of money easier that way. But mainly, it really seems to be the trick is to make sure that you don't have to pay as much as you might think you'd have to pay. So what all armies do is say you're going to get, say for in a Greek army, you might get a drachma a day, 30 drachma a month. But then there's deductions. So if the army pays for your food and sustenance, then the amount for that is deducted from the pay for the soldier, which means you don't have to pay it, you don't have to carry it along. And that's a system that is introduced, I think, in the Greek armies, but in the Roman armies similarly sometime in the 4th century. I mean, early on, the earliest campaigns, there really isn't any pay. The campaigns are short, so soldiers bring their own supplies. It's for a couple days. They're probably citizens, so they're not expected to pay. They're fighting for the honor of their city. But as time goes on, campaigns take longer. They can't bring all their supplies themselves, and they have to get some pay. So it's initially it's just about paying the soldier so he can live. And then at the end of the campaign, there might be some reward in some form of, a monetary amount. But you also have to always remember that any money in the ancient world is always based upon its intrinsic value. So the money, the value that is represented is not virtual like in our money. It's a certain quantity of silver, a certain quantity of gold, or a certain quantity of copper. So if at the end of the campaign you get to sack a city, and everybody gets, I don't know, some part of a gold candelabra, you've also been paid. And you see that in the Roman army, where the very earliest pay that the soldiers get is called an as rude, which is rough bronze. It's just a lump of bronze instead of any coin. The coins come in later. So it's just some amount, and if it's just some amount, you can just bring lumps of that stuff along until you have to get coins, and then you can trust that your army is going to be victorious, and you can sack city after city, so that you don't actually have to bring any money along. You can just sort of resupply your supply of money by getting it out of your enemies. And of course, there's examples of cities or states that really can't afford a long campaign, but sort of just send the army on the way and hope that it'll work out in the end. Final solution is to make some of the citizens pay. And the best example for this is the Athenian system for the triarchy, which is a city obligation. The city will pay for building the trireme and for the pay of the rowers themselves, but the triarch is a rich citizen and is also the captain of the ship, has to pay for the upkeep of the ship. So you sort of get different sources to divide the burden of paying for everything, and therefore the burden of bringing it along. I think that's sort of it.
Yeah, well, you do get I think we've had a couple of articles on mercenaries getting paid by their employer minting coins, especially for them, in order to pay them with that. And we have sort of some countermarks, I think,
Yes.
As well, to sort of go, here you go, here's your agreed payment. The interesting thing again with the mercenaries is, of course, that with the Cretan mercenaries who we've got the contracts for, the city that the contract was with is contracted to provide 100 mercenaries for a set period of time. They get paid in advance. So it's actually up to the city to supply their men with a stipend and supplies. And if any casualties, if they suffer any casualties, the city has to replace them. So
the whole system seems to be that for every city, it is even the richest cities and later richest states or richest commanders, it is difficult to get all that money together. And probably physically difficult because you just need so much of it. It just adds up so quickly.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The avoiding paying by deductions or paying in advance early and going, now you go on campaign, you've been paid.
Or here's a little money to pay for yourself, get it at the end.
Yes. And we get lots of instances, of course, of mercenaries being upset that they aren't being paid or that their pay's in arrears, and rebelling against their employer because they want to renegotiate in a tight spot. We get that in Sicily during the First Punic War, and we get that at various different points in time when they think that they can get a better deal and renegotiate. Or switch sides because they're offering them more money.
Oh yeah.
That's always the problem with mercenaries, especially. And it's even for legionaries, because that's in the end how some of the reforms under Augustus come about. That he has this enormous army, and one of the first things he does, well, not one of the first things, but one of the things he does, he extends the number of years that a legionary has to serve, which is going to have the sort of handy side effect that more of them are not going to live to the end of that service. So there's fewer pensions to pay and stuff like that. So, yeah. Well, even paying them a donative, especially the Praetorian Guard, paying them a bigger donative to make sure that you're emperor when you come to power. So paying paying soldiers is at all points an important thing to do.
Very true.